is more. Vi en vei mer angina, a titum suspir, let die.
Altar of Duty. The Last Supper in the great hall of Caer Castle unfolded amid the murmur of cups and the crackle of torches. Caelan, his gaze fixed on the wine, spoke more with his thoughts than with his voice. "If we leave at dawn, we'll reach Morven before midday," he said, trying to hide his impatience. Aemon smiled, that familiar mix of mockery and brotherly affection in his eyes. "Then I'll finally stop seeing you sigh like a troubadour." Caelan arched a brow. "I haven't sighed. You don't have to. I know you, brother. Your mind isn't here, it's in the arms of a certain lady." Caelan gave a soft laugh, though the jab struck true. Every day of the journey, he had carried Eira's memory pulsing in his chest. "I admit I've missed her."
"That's not an admission," Aemon replied with theatrical flair. "That's an understatement."
Caelan shook his head with a faint smile. "You'll speak differently when love finds you." "It never will," Aemon declared with a confidence that fooled no one. Their exchange was cut short when the castle steward hurried across the hall, summoned by a servant. Moments later, the sound of footsteps echoed at the entrance. Caelan turned, and his heart tightened at the sight of his father, accompanied by Finn. The hall fell silent. Servants and knights rose from their seats, as Lord Redar of Garou stood to greet the unexpected visitors. Caelan descended from the dais at once, Aemon close behind him. Only grave news could have brought his father so far. "Earl Alaric," Redar greeted respectfully. "An unexpected honor." "My apologies for the intrusion," the Earl replied, weary but steady. "King Philip summons us to Ruallen. He has ordered our presence, mine and my son's. We are to pay homage and swear fealty." The words struck Caelan like a stone. His longing to return to Eira vanished like the smoke curling from the candles. Instead of riding west, toward her, he would ride north, to a king who tolerated no delay. Redar escorted the Earl to the high table, while servants rushed to prepare chambers and provisions. Caelan, Aemon and Finn took seats on a bench near the wall, where the fire cast restless shadows. Finn broke the silence. "I bring news from Morven. It's fortunate you're here, halfway to Ruallen, but it will delay your return. Eira is growing impatient." Caelan clenched his jaw. "Are we all summoned?" Finn shook his head, chewing absently on a piece of meat. "Only you and the Earl. I'll return to Morven with Aemon." Aemon frowned, ready to protest, but Caelan raised a hand. "He's right. Someone must keep the house while we're away." Aemon sighed, surrendering with a nod. Caelan managed a faint smile, the solemn kind of a man who understands the price of duty. Yet his mind had already crossed the distance, to Eira's eyes waiting for him, to the promise suspended between them, as fragile as the dawn that would soon separate them. Chapter 70. Campfire. At dusk, the Morvens made camp beside the Robeck, across from the Tower of Ruallen. Fires crackled beneath the overcast sky, and the scent of roasted hare mingled with the damp smell of the river. They had barely finished supper when the order arrived. All Norman lords were to convene at once. Caelan accompanied his father to the pavilion of Caelric Doraine, where the air was thick with sweat and unease. Too many men, too many miles traveled, and the strain of a divided realm. Caelric beckoned them to speak softly, and Earl Alaric took the floor with the calm precision of a man who measured every gesture. "I suppose it will be a mere formality," he said. "If Philip seeks a peaceful transfer of power, he will make no unreasonable demands." A murmur of agreement rippled through the tent. "It sickens me to bow to a French king," growled Emeric of Tournai. "He can't be worse than John Lackland," Caelric replied. "That one was more English than Norman." Caelan spoke, his tone firm yet composed. "And Richard the Lionheart always saw us as a purse of gold for his wars. I doubt Philip wishes to repeat his mistakes." His father nodded. "Every lord has strengthened his walls. We are not conquered subjects, but a power still worthy of respect. Caelan looked around, conviction burning in his eyes. Philip must understand that the sons of the old Vikings do not kneel to tyrants. If he seeks allies not slaves, he will find loyalty. Otherwise, he will find steel. The silence that followed broke into a chorus of approval. Eira of Morven smiled, and struck the table with his hand. Then I propose we open that cask of ale and drink like the Norman lords we are. Laughter filled the tent, and soon the clash of cups rose like a defiant roar. When father and son finally stepped outside, the night throbbed with coarse songs. I hope Philip hears this noise from his tower, Caelan murmured, half joking. And that our companions don't arrive hungover to tomorrow's audience, his father replied with amusement. Far away in Morven, Eira sewed in silence beside Lady Mairead as the sun filtered pale through the solarium-stained glass. The thread tangled in her fingers, as did her thoughts. His letters have kept me sane, she confessed with a weary smile.
Nonsense, said the lady.
You've survived kings and sieges. Few women can claim as much. Eira lowered her gaze, remembering the shadows of Caer Thalen. Even so, I fear what the future brings. Caelan gives me courage, but I know danger never sleeps. Lady Mairead regarded her with tenderness. My son will need you strong. Philip is no saint, but neither is he a madman like your cousin. Still, the times ahead will test every Norman. A shiver ran through Eira. Just the thought of his visit unsettles me.
Do not worry, dear.
You'll be wed as soon as Caelan returns. And if the king learns of your kinship with John, well, he won't be foolish enough to make an enemy of a Morven. Eira wanted to believe her. She looked at the thread hanging from the needle and thought that her fate, like that thread, was about to be tied to Caelan's, or quietly break apart. Chapter 71. The Tower of Ruallan. Dawn came grey and damp. The Norman lords waited over an hour in a narrow antechamber without a fire, before being admitted to the presence of the King of France. Caelan was not surprised. John Lackland had once made them wait for days, merely to flaunt his power. When they were finally summoned, all knelt before Philip Augustus. Caelan lifted his gaze and, despite his reluctance, understood why the man inspired obedience. He was younger than expected, yet his bearing, the gleam of his bald crown beneath the circlet and the angular lines of his face, gave him a cold, almost metallic authority. The king raised a hand. Do you hear it? He asked, looking toward the damp walls. Caelan blinked. No one answered. The monarch's voice, sharp and cutting, contrasted with his imposing presence. Listen, Philip repeated, with a faint, eerie smile. It is the ghost of a prince, still bound to the place where he was slain. A murmur rippled through the hall. They all knew the story, but never before had anyone, let alone a king, spoken it aloud. Philip rose. Prince Arthur of Brittany. My ally. The rightful heir to England. He died here, in this very tower, at the hands of his uncle, the usurper John. Struck him down in a drunken rage, tied a stone to his body, and cast him into the Seine. The silence that followed was thick as smoke. The king narrowed his eyes, his voice dropping a tone. I know it, because it was confessed to me. Caelan did not doubt that someone had confessed under screams, more from torment than truth. Yet the truth mattered little. The crime of one king now served as the justification for the conquest of another. Philip continued, with a solemnity that verged on theatre. That is why you are here, lords of Normandy. Not to bow before a foreigner, but to restore justice. Caer Thalen was the proof of your loyalty. I shall be the king who brings peace back to this land. Caelan kept his head high, his eyes on the stone floor and the shifting torchlight shadows. He did not believe in ghosts, yet a chill passed through him, the sense that history itself was watching, that this tower held too many secrets and too much blood. For an instant, he thought of Eira. Of her faith in him, her courage. Perhaps she was right. The ruins of the past could give birth to something new. Maybe the fall of Caer Thalen had not been an end, but a beginning. He drew a slow breath. Traitor or not, he had remained loyal to his people. And if Normandy's fate was to be reborn under another banner, so be it, so long as Eira was part of that future. Chapter 72. King Philip. Caelan knelt before the King of France, and as he spoke the words of allegiance, he remembered an old legend of his bloodline. Centuries ago, when the king of the Franks demanded that the chieftain Rollo kneel before him, the proud Viking refused. It was then that Eric Dragon, Caelan's ancestor, stepped forward to save the treaty. He kissed the king's foot, and nearly sent him tumbling from his horse. Since that day, the Morven family had said that they knew how to bow without ever breaking. That thought sustained him as he rose in the Tower of Ruallen, under the cold gaze of Philip Augustus. The gesture was the same centuries later, men of Normandy yielding before a foreign power. But Caelan knew the spirit of his ancestors still pulsed within them, untamed, waiting for its hour. The banquet that followed was splendid and tense. No one was invited to the king's table, except one man, Lucien de Ravine, Count of Belvin, whom Philip praised publicly for his brilliant leadership in the capture of Caer Thalen. Caelan felt his stomach tighten. He watched the king toast the man, smiling with the smug satisfaction that only victory over others can bring. Later, back in his tent, he murmured to his father, "I do not trust that man. Ravine holds too much sway over the king." "I doubt he would risk mentioning the escape of John's cousin," replied Count Alaric calmly. "If he did, his own honor would come into question." Caelan nodded, though suspicion still gnawed at him. Perhaps the king will appoint him to oversee the construction of that new fortress he boasts about. His father let out a brief laugh. "Then may the gods have mercy on the French masons." Caelan smiled, his tension easing slightly.
Let's hope he at least seeks counsel from Norman builders.
"We are the ones who raise fortresses that endure for centuries." He slept better than expected. At dawn he was ready at last to return to Morven. Until the royal order arrived, the counts were to accompany Philip to inspect the site where his new castle would rise. They rode to a hill north of Ruallen. The king spoke incessantly, describing with enthusiasm his future seat of power, the political heart of the duchy for generations. Caelan listened in silence, studying both the terrain and the king's intentions. Suddenly, Philip turned to his father.
"What do the Morvens think?"
Count Alaric answered without hesitation, "The site is strong, Your Majesty. Built properly, it will serve its purpose." The Normans chuckled under their breath, the French frowned, insulted. But Philip nodded with a half smile. "A wise remark. And I hear the Morven castle is worthy of admiration. I would like to see it with my own eyes." "You will always be welcome, sire," replied the count with measured courtesy. The king continued, in a tone almost jovial, "Then I shall travel with you tomorrow. And I have heard from the Count of Belvin that your son is soon to be wed. My presence at that union will stand as a symbol of the new era that begins." Caelan exchanged a glance with his father. Both understood what it meant. His wedding would become a political act, a spectacle in service of the new power. Even so, he inclined his head and said, with a calm he did not feel, "It will be an honor, Your Majesty." Inside, however, one image alone kept him steady, Eira's smile waiting for him. For her alone, it was worth pretending loyalty before a king who would never understand what moved the heart of a Norman. Chapter 73. The King on the Road. The sun bathed the inner courtyard of Morven Castle, as Eira and Lady Mairead strolled among the pens. The morning smelled of grass and soap, and the countess greeted everyone with a smile, asking after their children, the sick elders, remembering names and faces with a natural grace Eira envied.
"This is how a true lady rules," she thought, watching her.
With affection, not distance. They were laughing with a washerwoman, when a cry split the air. The hens scattered, and the courtyard opened to make way for a rider covered in dust, his horse white with foam. Eira felt her heart stop when she recognized the banner. It was one of the men who had ridden with Count Alaric to Ruallen. Lady Mairead paled but gripped Eira's hand tightly.
"Let us not think the worst just yet."
The knight dismounted clumsily, knelt before the countess, and spoke between ragged breaths, "My lady. Count Alaric sends me, the king is on his way." Eira would have fallen, if her mother-in-law hadn't held her upright. The air grew thick, a murmur of fear rippled through the courtyard. "When?" asked Lady Mairead, already composed. The messenger drank from a bowl someone handed him. "They left the morning after my departure. The procession is heavy, but they could arrive tonight, or by dawn." The countess straightened her shoulders with the poise of a queen. "Then there's no time to lose. Eira with me, we must prepare the kitchen and the chambers. Finn, see to this man and his horse. Amin, find Sir Brannock and warn him." Eira followed her, her pulse still pounding in her temples. But as they crossed the courtyard with steady steps, she realized that acting was better than fearing. She sensed with painful clarity that this woman was not only guiding her through urgency, but also teaching her the art of courage. The King of France was approaching Morven. With him might come judgment, danger, or ruin. Even so, Eira vowed to keep her head high. She had to, for Caelan, for the family that had taken her in, and for herself. If fate meant to test her, she would answer as a Morven. Chapter 74. A fly on the wall. "With His Majesty's solemn pace," remarked Count Alaric when the outline of Morven appeared atop the hill, "our ladies will have had at least a day to prepare." Caelan did not smile. His heart weighed heavy with a bitter certainty. The happiness he had finally touched could vanish with a single whim of the king. He longed to hold Eira to protect her, but knew that one reckless gesture would draw the attention of Philippe, and of Ravine, who rode far too close to them. The king halted his horse at the crest of the path, gazing at the sunlit walls. "As magnificent as I hoped," he said, pleased. The French courtiers murmured in admiration. The castle, perched high on the promontory, looked like a challenge carved in stone. "Impenetrable," murmured Count Alaric. Philippe smiled with irony. "Like Caer Thalen." Caelan replied evenly, "We took good note of its weaknesses." "Indeed." "And you were there," said the king, a spark of recognition in his tone. Then, rising in his stirrups, he pointed toward the fields. "Are those the orchards where your brandy is born?"
"Yes, your majesty," Caelan replied.
"I've tasted it. Sublime. Perhaps I'll let myself be conquered by it before your walls." As they rode toward the castle, Caelan thought that this king would not be the first to surrender to Morven's golden liquor. Tilda, despite 2 days of frantic preparations and a sleepless night, Eira felt strangely serene when the royal procession crossed the drawbridge. Her heart pounded fiercely, yet her calm came from the face she sought among them all, Caelan's, upright, steady, with that faint smile that anchored her amid the storm. She had understood something vital: tyrants feed on fear. With John she had been a victim, with Philippe she would not be. The monarch dismounted with the help of a page in livery. He greeted Lady Mairead in flawless French, and she replied with courtly grace. Eira, still kneeling, suppressed a smile upon hearing that sharp voice that did not quite match the king's imposing figure. When Caelan approached her, the air seemed to thicken. She could not touch him, but his mere presence steadied her. "Your Majesty," said Count Alaric, presenting them, "allow me to introduce Eira of Lysarne, my son's betrothed and future Countess of Morven." Eira accepted Caelan's hand, and rose with dignity. "Your Majesty," she greeted, meeting the sovereign's gaze. Philippe's dark eyes gleamed with an ambiguous light. "Are we, the English king's cousin?" "Enchanté." Caelan held his breath, fearing she might falter. But Eira's voice rang clear and steady as steel. "A distant kinship, your Majesty. As you know, we do not always choose our family, except when we are fortunate enough to marry the right one." The silence that followed grew almost tangible. Then the king burst into a loud, satisfied laugh. "Well said, Lady Eira. And believe me, King John will soon hear of your marriage to the heir of Morven." Eira inclined her head slightly, her eyes glinting with mischief. "We would give anything to be a fly on the wall when he does, your Majesty." Caelan breathed again, relieved and in awe. She had turned danger into grace. And when the king requested that she accompany him on his tour of the castle, Caelan agreed with a composed bow, though pride and something deeper burned in his chest. Eira could not help but find irony in it all. She knew well the tangled marriages of King Philippe. Her cousin John had made them a constant source of mockery. She recalled his cruel laughter upon learning that the French monarch, after repudiating Ingeborg of Denmark and remarrying, had been forced by the Pope to take back his lawful wife under threat of interdict. That memory gave her a dangerous advantage. She had risked much by using it to defend herself, even suspecting that Philippe had already decided her marriage to Caelan of Morven would be the most elegant revenge against the English king. She also knew the monarch was mercurial, quick to anger, swift to forgive. But he was not a man to be underestimated. As she walked through the castle halls on his arm, Eira forced herself to remain poised, her step steady, her heart alert. The tension of the moment, the curious gazes, the echo of footsteps, the shimmer of light on the tapestries, wrapped around her like a scene that did not belong to her. And yet something within her grew calm. Caelan watched her from the far end of the hall, and in his eyes was a silent promise, it's over now. For the first time in a long while, Eira allowed a spark of hope to open in her chest. The last obstacle between her and the life she longed for, she thought, was finally behind them. Chapter 75. Doubts. After the exchange of courtesies at the entrance, Caelan's parents accompanied the king to his chambers. At last alone, Caelan drew Eira into his arms. She let herself melt against his chest, feeling the tension slowly dissolve between them. They stayed that way, clinging to each other, oblivious to the bustle of the castle. "You were magnificent," he murmured, brushing her temple. "I've decided I've spent too much of my life fearing kings," she replied with a half-smile. "But I'll admit, it was a risk."
"One that worked in our favor," he said.
"Your kinship is no longer an obstacle. Philippe will bless us." "Don't trust that too easily. Kings change moods faster than the wind. And yet they must still be faced with our heads held high," he said, leading her toward his chamber. "Philippe is here to weigh our loyalty. They say he appreciates wine, fine meals, and women," she replied with a spark of humor. "At least in the first two, your mother will please him. They also say he is generous to his friends, and cruel to those who disappoint him. We'll need to tread carefully." "Your father will manage him," she said calmly. "No king can intimidate a Morven." Caelan laughed, unfastening his doublet. "You already speak like a true countess. And you like a man who needs rest," she teased.
"Shall I start with your boots?"
Later, their entwined bodies breathed in unison. Eira traced her fingers down Caelan's back, feeling the warmth of his skin and the unspoken promise in his restrained desire. She knew what he longed for, the same as she, but both resisted crossing that threshold before their wedding night. "Soon," she whispered, caressing his face.
"The waiting is killing me," he confessed with a weary smile.
"And I love you for that. I've always imagined giving myself to you on our first night as husband and wife." Caelan said nothing. His silence weighed between them, and Eira understood what he did not speak. He doubted her innocence. She could not blame him. She had lived among suspicion and false vows. Her age and past were easy soil for doubt.
But she did not try to justify herself.
The moment would come when he would know, when truth would speak without words in the touch of their joined bodies. Then he would understand she had never belonged to another. She smiled in the dim light. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "Nothing important," she lied softly. Caelan watched her in silence, captivated by the serenity of her face. He had known many women, yet never had he felt this, the dizzying fall of love. The others had taught him pleasure, but none had made him desire with his soul, only with his body. The thought of possessing her, of being wholly joined to her, sent a tremor through him. He prayed in silence that Eira was untouched, though he knew that if she was not, it would not be through lack of virtue but through another's cruelty. He would never let her believe that could lessen her worth to him. He bent and kissed her forehead. "I love you," he said softly. "But I fear we must dress, a king awaits our toast." Eira smiled, resigned and radiant.
"Then let him wait a little longer."
Doubts and toasts. Heads bowed as King Philip crossed the threshold of Morven's great hall with Lady Mairead on his arm, splendid and serene. Her bearing radiated authority, yet there was also a warmth in her that soothed the gathered crowd. Eira, following behind on the arm of Count Alaric, felt that something within her had changed. The wounded, mistrustful woman who had arrived weeks before was gone. Love had restored her to herself, renewed, alive. Faces that had once looked upon her with suspicion now smiled with genuine kindness. They recognized that her heart belonged to Morven's heir. Caelan entered last, flanked by Aemon and Finn. When the king took his seat in the count's chair, everyone waited for the Morven family to sit before following suit. Philip noticed but showed no displeasure. Rather, he smiled with that courtesy that concealed the watchfulness of a man measuring every loyalty. Eira, seated a few places away, breathed a quiet sigh of relief at not being obliged to speak with the monarch. The mere presence of Caelan beside her filled all her senses. The warmth of his nearness, the curve of his smile, the faint brush of his knee beneath the table, each set her aflame. She barely dared glance at him, but Caelan met her eyes with an unmistakable spark. He took her hand beneath the cloth, and held it captive between his own. That secret touch was more dizzying than any words. Around them, music and the aromas of the feast filled the air. Servants moved in and out with steaming platters, the murmur of the guests swelled with each course. Only one man seemed untouched by the joy around him, Lucien de Ravine. His dark, fixed gaze pierced Eira like an unhealed wound. "He's still resentful that I deceived him at Caer Thalen," she murmured, barely moving her lips. Caelan bent closer, his voice a whisper against her ear. "I think it bothers him more to see you beside the king, and to know you've enchanted him." The clamor quieted when Count Alaric rose, cup in hand. His voice, deep and steady, echoed through the stone hall. "People of Morven, nobles and friends, let us drink to His Majesty King Philip of France. With his aid, Normandy has found a new dawn. May he rule with justice, and may this land remain free and prosperous. To Philip Augustus." The crowd rose, lifting cups and pitchers. "To Philip Augustus," they cried as one. Eira leaned toward Caelan, smiling. "Perfect," she whispered. "We'll know tomorrow, when we receive him in private," he replied gravely. But the murmur of the hall fell silent again. The king had risen. "Or perhaps we'll know now," she murmured. Philip raised his cup. "I thank the House of Morven for its generosity," he declared in a clear voice. "I have seen that this land is as noble as its people. Tomorrow, I shall witness the union of Lord Caelan and Lady Eira, and there could be no more auspicious symbol for this new era. I drink to their happiness." The hall erupted in applause, and the chime of wine filled the air. Caelan and Eira met each other's eyes, their lips almost touching. "Tomorrow," they said together, a silent promise sealed amid the noise of the world. Chapter 76. Delayed gratification. Caelan rose before dawn. He ordered a bath, dressed calmly and tried to tame the impatience consuming him. He and Eira had chosen to sleep in separate chambers for decorum's sake, and for the imminent visit of the countess, but the distance had felt unbearable. He missed her warmth, her scent, the soft rhythm of her breath beside his. His valet entered carrying the wedding attire, a black velvet doublet and woolen hose. "The blue lining suits you well, my lord," the boy said, smoothing the sleeves. Caelan smiled. "My mother insisted. She says blue brings fortune to a wedding. And no sensible man contradicts his mother on such a day." Caelan laughed softly, the sound fading when Sir Brannock appeared with a troubled look. "My lord, Count Alaric summons you. The king is with him in the solar. He wishes to see you before the ceremony." Caelan muttered a barely audible curse. "My mother will not be pleased. And my betrothed even less." His brothers were already waiting in the solar, immaculate and tense. The air felt charged. Philip, standing by the window, turned slowly as they entered. "We were discussing," said Count Alaric with rehearsed calm, "the king's proposal to appoint the Count of Belvin as governor of Normandy." "It is not a proposal," corrected the monarch, his voice as cold as the metal of his crown. Caelan drew a slow breath. Lucien de Ravine is a fine soldier, your majesty, but ruling requires more than discipline. It calls for wisdom, and a measure of mercy. The silence tightened. Philip's eyes narrowed. Alaric de Morven spoke with quiet composure.
The Norman people have endured one tyrant already, sire.
They will not respect another who fails to understand them. Philip stroked his beard slowly, a half-smile that was no smile curving his lips. You speak with dangerous frankness, Count Alaric. I have ordered men executed for less. The silence was so heavy that even the wind outside seemed to stop.
At last the king exhaled.
Do you think yourself the better governor? The count met his gaze without hesitation.
I probably would be, sire.
But I have no wish to spend my days shut away in Rouen. Philip raised an eyebrow. Then you lack ambition. Only the kind that does not serve my people, Alaric replied with dignity. Who are now mine, said the king curtly. And I am certain France will guard this jewel with wisdom, the count concluded. For a moment Caelan feared the worst. But the monarch broke into laughter. We shall reflect later, Count. For now, we must attend a wedding. When the king departed, Caelan released the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He set his blue-plumed hat upon his head and murmured to his father, At last I may wed. Alaric smiled with tender pride.
And I still live to see it.
Tilda Eira had never seen the countess so agitated. She paced from wall to wall, her face flushed with indignation. To delay a wedding on royal whim. What an insult! Eira tried to soothe her, though her own pulse trembled. All will be well, milady. Just a little patience. Lady Myrede sighed, then looked at her with gentle warmth. You are radiant, my dear. That blue looks as though it were woven from the sky itself. The ladies murmured among themselves, uneasy, until Father Corbinian appeared at the door, solemn as a herald of God. Milady, he announced, his voice ringing like a bell, the groom awaits you at the chapel doors. Silence fell. Then, as if an unseen wand had touched the room, the women smiled, the nerves dissolved, and Eira felt in her chest the unmistakable flutter of hope. The day had come. And the future, at last, awaited her at the end of that corridor. Chapter 77. A marriage. Caelan knew he ought to feel honored. The King of France himself, Philip, was attending his wedding. Yet seeing the monarch remain on horseback before the chapel, exuding superiority, irritated him more than he dared admit. All annoyance vanished, however, when Eira appeared on her father's arm. His heart stopped. The blue of her gown shimmered beneath the morning light, a hue that seemed woven from the calm sky after a storm. Caelan inclined his head toward Aemon and murmured, Now I understand why mother insisted on blue. His brother gave him an amused look. The trim on your doublet. Matching colors, is it? He whispered. Too perfect a coincidence not to be her doing, Caelan replied, struggling to hide a smile. Father Corbinian cleared his throat, casting them a reproving glance as the king's horse snorted behind them. For a moment, the solemnity of the scene brushed against absurdity, and Caelan had to suppress a laugh. He removed his hat, handed it to his brother and straightened his back. This was no time to look like a nervous boy. When Count Alaric placed Eira's hand in his, the world seemed to stop. Caelan looked into her eyes and understood with luminous certainty that everything he had endured, the wars, the betrayals, the waiting, had led him to this moment. She smiled, trembling faintly, and he gently squeezed her fingers. Father Corbinian intoned the words of the rite in Latin, his voice echoing through the ancient stones of the chapel. And as the sacred sound enveloped them, Caelan drew a deep breath and thought that no power, neither king nor fate, could ever steal from him this, the pure quiet certainty of loving and being loved. After the opening rites, Father Corbinian switched to Norman French. Eira breathed a sigh of relief, though she caught the frown on King Philip's face. She didn't care. Nothing could tarnish that moment. A beautiful warrior dressed in black awaited her to join their destinies. Her eyes traced the precise cut of his doublet, the proud bearing, the restrained elegance in every line of his body. She bit her lip to still the tremor running through her. The priest's voice brought her back to solemnity. "We have come before God, his angels and all his saints," he intoned, "to unite this man and this woman, one flesh and two spirits under the same faith." Eira held her breath, praying that questions about her former betrothal would not resurface. The king, impatient, broke the silence. "Come now, father, spare us the sermon. I'm sure you've done your investigating well enough." Caelan squeezed her hand quickly in shared amusement. Eira avoided meeting his gaze, afraid that laughter might betray them both. The priest continued, his voice unsteady. "If any among you knows of an impediment to this union, speak now or remain silent forever." No one moved. The air thrummed with anticipation. "Caelan of Morven," Corbinian went on, "do you take this woman to be your wife, to love, honor and protect her in sickness and in health, forsaking all others for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Caelan answered, his deep voice resonating like an eternal vow. "Eira of Lysarne," said the priest, "do you take this man to be your husband, to serve, honor, love and be faithful to him in sickness and in health, forsaking all others for as long as you both shall live?" Eira's heart overflowed. "I do." They looked at each other. There was no temple, no king, no wars, only them. Caelan repeated his vows with the calm of one who has found his home. "I, Caelan of Morven, take you, Eira of Lysarne, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse in sickness and in health until death do us part." She followed, her voice both firm and trembling. "I, Eira of Lysarne, take you, Caelan of Morven, to be my husband, to have and to hold, to bring joy to your house and your bed, and to love you as long as life shall bind us." Caelan smiled at her bold phrase, and she gave him a look that promised sweet revenge. Aemon presented the ring, and when Caelan slipped it onto her finger, Eira felt the world reorder itself around her. Her past was gone, what awaited was a new life, shared, radiant. King Philip was the first to applaud, satisfied with himself. But Eira barely heard him. Her eyes sought Caelan's, and there she found all she needed to know: love, certainty, peace. As they walked together toward the altar for the nuptial mass, she thought with a barely contained smile that she hoped the king did not intend to attend it on horseback. A few weeks earlier, Caelan might have dreaded spending hours on his knees beside Eira. But during the nuptial mass, he could only think of the warm brush of her arm against his, a prayer deeper than any psalm. While Father Corbinian lost himself in his endless homily, a barely audible laugh escaped Eira's lips, and Caelan thought that sound was worth more than all the sermons in the world. When they left the chapel, they discovered that King Philip had already departed, and Caelan felt nothing but relief. The orphans of Caer Thalen came forward to offer them flowers. Eira's emotion as she received them made Caelan realize that in that gesture, all her past pain had found redemption. Lady Mairead embraced her as a daughter, Aemon teased that he would kiss her, Finn greeted her shyly, and Count Alaric sealed her welcome with heartfelt words, "You are a gift from heaven." Looking at them all, Caelan understood that destiny, or divine mercy, had bound them forever. As they crossed the great hall, the people's applause thundered like a blessing, and when they joined hands, they knew their love now belonged to the whole world. Chapter 78. Satisfaction. Caelan had thought that when the moment came, he would know exactly what to do. But when he found himself standing before Eira in the stillness of the bridal chamber, his heart gave a sudden helpless lurch. "I feel like a clumsy boy on his first night," he murmured, instantly regretting the words. She smiled softly, trying to hide her own anxiety. "I'm nervous too," she confessed, her fingers brushing the edge of her gown. Caelan held his breath as she slowly lifted the fabric. The cloth slipped through her fingers, revealing a smooth thigh, and strapped to it a small dagger set with dark stones. "So that's what you were hiding," he said with a half-smile. "Do you mean to challenge my sword with yours?" Eira laughed, light and clear, before letting the gown fall again. "No," she replied, with a trace of melancholy. "It was my grandfather's dagger. I have no family to give me away, so I brought him with me." He drew her close by the waist. "You don't need it anymore," he whispered. "You have a family now. You have me. You'll never be alone again." She lifted her gaze to him, and in her eyes was a peace born only of love. Then will you disarm me, my lord? Caelan fell to his knees, pressing a kiss to the skin of her thigh before unfastening the straps.
That was my intention, he murmured, losing his words at the warmth of her touch.
After that there were no words, only instinct. The air filled with Eira's sweet scent, and desire long restrained surged through him like a wave. He lifted her in his arms, she wrapped her legs around him, surrendering without fear. When he laid her upon the bed, the world shrank to the sound of her quickened breath, and the trembling promise upon her lips. Make me yours, he whispered. I've waited too long. He looked at her with reverent tenderness. I love you, was all he could say before he sank into her. There was a moment of silence, a brief exhalation of pain and wonder, followed by the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Then there was nothing but the joining of their bodies, the certainty of being one, the shared tremor that carried them to the edge of heaven. When it was over, Eira clung to him, unwilling to let go. Don't move, she whispered. I already miss you. Caelan laughed softly against her neck.
It won't be long before we repeat it, my wife.
She traced lazy circles across his back with her nails. Did I surprise you? He lifted his head to meet her eyes. Yes. And I'm proud to be the first. But even if I hadn't been, nothing would change what I feel for you. Eira smiled, brushing her fingers against his cheek. Then we're two of a kind. He leaned down again, his lips grazing hers.
This time I'll go slow, he promised.
She closed her eyes, smiling. I'm in no hurry. Epilogue. Year of our Lord 1206. 2 years had passed, and still Caelan's heart beat with the same urgency every time he sought Eira. He entered her chamber in haste, eager to share the news, but the sight before him stopped him in his tracks. She sat by the window, sunlight turning her hair to new gold. She was nursing little Roderick, and in that moment Caelan forgot everything else. Papa, babbled Lucan, tottering toward him with his hands outstretched. Caelan laughed as he lifted the boy into his arms. Have you been helping Mama with your brother? He asked, kissing his forehead. The child squirmed, eager to be set down again so he could chase the old wolf that shadowed him everywhere. Eira smiled, weary and radiant. He never stops, not even in his sleep, she said.
Now tell me, what is it?
Caelan drew a deep breath. Jon's forces have failed. He's been driven from Angers. Both kings have agreed to a truce. Aemon and Finn are safe. She nodded, relieved. Do you think the peace will last? Caelan slowly shook his head, taking little Roderick from her arms and resting him against his shoulder. I doubt it. Jon rarely keeps his word. He'll use this pause to weave new alliances. He'll want Normandy back, and he won't rest until he tries again. Then Philip won't sleep easily either, Eira replied, modestly adjusting her gown. No, he admitted. He won't rest until the Angevin name is erased from the lands and the nobles descended from Angrian, and the Plantagenets. The baby, content, drifted into sleep. Caelan laid him gently in the cradle, and covered him with a blanket embroidered by Eira's hands. For a moment he simply watched his family, the woman he loved, their 2 sons, the peaceful hush of home. Yet beneath that calm, a faint unease lingered. Normandy's future was still uncertain, the Norman pride still wounded under France's shadow. He went to her and drew her into his arms, sinking with her into the wide chair beside the fire. You've made me a whole man, he murmured against her neck. But I'll confess something shameful, I'm jealous of my own son. Eira laughed softly, running her fingers through his hair. It won't be long, she teased gently. Soon you'll have me all to yourself again. He looked up, desire bright in his eyes. Then let the world burn, he said quietly. As long as I have you, I don't care who rules France or England. She rested her forehead against his, smiling tenderly. Outside, the northern wind stirred the valley's apple trees, carrying the scent of the uncertain future that awaited them. Inside, in the warmth of their home, there was only love, laughter, and the soft rhythm of Eira's heartbeat against Caelan's chest, the true kingdom he had conquered. Ballad of Eira and Caelan. Beneath the mist of the Lysarne valley when iron slept and the sea roared, Two wandering souls crossed each other's shadow, he, born of duty, she, of exile and wound. She fled the name of a king, he swore loyalty to a divided land. But in her gaze, like fire in the rain, love ignited without asking leave. Traitor or guardian, asked destiny. Queen or captive? Answered the road. And among the broken walls of Caer Thalen, their hands spoke what their tongues could not. For no border can bind the soul, nor crown decree what the heart decrees. And when the king demands obedience, only those who love dare to resist. They say the wind still sings their story when the tide touches the ancient stones. Eira the flame who conquered fear, Caelan the wolf who chose love over glory. The end.